Little and Broken, but Still Good, by Wicked Writer on AO3. Episode 9, Chapter 9. Hitoshi fit into the Aizawa family like he was made for it. While the first week was a little rocky, Hitoshi not really knowing where to fit in with the family dynamic between Shouta and Eri, he figured it out eventually. In the mornings, after getting himself ready for school, he would often help Shouta to make sure Eri was dressed and set for school. Having the extra person to help allowed Shouta to cook a decent breakfast for the family, although he still only managed to eat a jelly packet while packing lunch for both kids. He also started to text Hizashi far more frequently. It started with just a few pictures from a pet adoption site. Shouta had been thinking about adopting a family cat, something that Eri had wanted for months, but wasn't sure which would work with their family. Every picture she showed Eri, she just remarked that it was cute and that they had to adopt it. Hitoshi gave very little input. Shouta worried that he felt like he didn't belong, even though he was very much part of the family. So he decided that Hitoshi would have the final say in which cat they adopted. The problem was, there were too many options. He started texting them to Hizashi, just as another adult input, but found his answers were more similar to Eri's. Every response was something along the lines of how much he liked the animal and when they were going to adopt it. He worried that if he left it up to Eri and Hizashi, he would come home to an apartment full of animals. Slowly, their conversation started to evolve. Small check-ins, seeing how their day went, to having full conversations. Normally, Shouta avoided texting. The dozen of unreplied messages from Emmy could attest to that. But he looked forward to exchanging throughout the day. Actually, Emmy remarked at how much Shouta had been on his phone during his lunch break, which he may or may not have changed so it lined up with Hisashi's lunch. One Friday, about 2 weeks from when Hitoshi first arrived, he came home with a letter and a huge smile on his face. "I got in! Look!" He threw his backpack on the floor, hopefully nothing broke inside, before shoving the letter in Shota's face. He had to pause in his cooking of dinner in order to grab the letter. Across the top was the official letterhead from UA High. He scanned over the letter with congratulating Hitoshi on receiving a high enough score to enter the advanced course. His new schedule was also included, which would start on Monday. "Congratulations. I knew you would." Shouta tousled his hair with a grin of his own. "What happened?" Eri walked into the kitchen, from where she was playing in the other room. "I got into the advanced classes." Hitoshi's smile wasn't fading anytime soon. It was a sight that Shouta rarely got to see. "Yay!" Eri jumped up and down in her excitement. "We should get ice cream." "What?" Shouta looked at her in confusion. "Remember when I went to the police station and afterwards you said we could get ice cream for being brave? Toshi should get ice cream for being brave, too." Eri explained, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The incident she was referring to was having to give her statement to the police about the bus, and what Overhaul did to her for the years in which she was captured. It wasn't quite the same as Hitoshi taking a test, but the settlement was there. "Sure, after dinner we can go." While cooking, Shouta took a moment to text Hizashi about the news. It wasn't until the three of them sat down to dinner that he received a text back with a string of emojis, some smiley faces, others with party hats, and some confetti. He didn't have a clue as to how to convey that message, so he just showed the text to Hitoshi, who just laughed and said thanks. "You should invite him to go out with us," Hitoshi suggested, through a mouthful of namajimi. "Are you sure?" Shouta felt like that would be stepping over a boundary. They were going out to celebrate Hitoshi's success. It didn't feel right to invite someone who he'd only met once. "Yeah, he seemed nice, and I'm sure Eri would be happy about it." Even though he just shrugged, there was something about Hitoshi's attitude that seemed to let on more. He hoped it was because he did like Hizashi, and not that he was just trying to be nice for Shota's sake. Happy about what? Hearing her name must have pulled her out of her concentration on eating. She still wasn't entirely good at using chopsticks, even with the rubber contractments used to train kids on how to use them. That we should invite Mr. Yamada to go eat ice cream, Hitoshi said before Shouta could deter him from planting the idea in her head. Can we? Her entire eyes lit up. With that, Shouta had no choice. He texted Hizashi to see if he was available and wanted to join, but made sure to be clear that he was allowed to say no. After all, it was a Friday night, and he could very easily have plans. The text was nearly instantaneous. He was excited to join them. They agreed on a time and place to meet. There was a shop not too far from the apartment that they could walk to. The rest of the dinner was spent talking about their different days, such like a real family would. Afterwards, Hitoshi helped Eri clean up and had her dry the dishes, with Shota's help, as he washed. Once they were done, Shouta texted Hizashi that they were leaving, and would see him shortly. Shouta wasn't exactly sure where Hizashi lived, but he made it seem like it wasn't too far away from the ice cream shop. Hopefully, he was telling the truth. Shouta felt a bit guilty if he had to make a long journey just to see them. It took a bit of time to wrangle Eri into her red jacket. She insisted she didn't need it even though the temperatures had been getting colder. But eventually they managed to get out of the door. The walk was peaceful, Eri holding onto his hand and debating which flavor she was going to get. Hitoshi was silent, but there was a small smile on his face the entire duration. There weren't too many others out at this time, and the chilly air made Shouta thankful that he grabbed the oversized gray scarf on the way out. Once they arrived, Hizashi was already waiting out front. He was distracted by something on his phone, and didn't see them right away. For a moment, Shouta was able to appreciate him from afar. Everything he wore always complimented him, even the black sweater and jeans he had on, probably to stay warm. He could see a rose color on his cheeks already. Hopefully, he wasn't waiting for too long. Mr. Yamada! Eri drew his attention, and the smile on his face was gorgeous. He lit up like a beacon in the dark, and Shouta couldn't help but get drawn closer. Hey, Eri. He knelt down and gave her a hug. When he stood back up, he extended a hand towards Hitoshi. Congratulations, man. I know how hard it could be. You must be so proud. Thanks. Hitoshi shook his hand, but there was a dusting of pink across his nose. Obviously, the kid wasn't used to compliments too much, something that Shouta would have to remedy sometime. Shouta ushered them inside. The cold was starting to get to him, and warming up sounded really good. Perhaps ice cream wasn't the most rational of choices for how cold it was, but it was what Hitoshi and Eri wanted, so who was he to argue? There was a few others in the place, a group of kids probably the same age as Hitoshi in the furthest corner, and a family cleaning up nearby, getting ready to leave. Eri ordered her favorite chocolate in a cone, which would mean she would end up wearing more than what she ate, and she would have to get a bath tonight. Hitoshi and Shouta both stuck to plain vanilla, and Hizashi ordered the coffee flavor. When it came to paying, Hizashi handed his car over far quicker than Shouta had been able to. Nope, I'm paying. I want to congratulate Hitoshi for making it into his course. Hizashi stuck his tongue out. We didn't invite you to pay. Let me get it. Shouta tried to counter, but Hizashi just shook his head. Not a chance. You can get it next time. The thought of a potential next time made Shota's stomach flip. He was starting to understand the old saying about butterflies in one's stomach. He knew that once the school year ended, he would be allowed to ask Hizashi on a proper date. But knowing that he felt the same, and that he was planning on a future, made Shouta hopeful in a way that he hadn't been in years. Over the past year, Shouta had used the excuse of Eri to avoid dating. He knew that, rationally, he could still have a dating life with a daughter, but the thought of leaving her alone so he could hook up with a stranger felt wrong. Obviously, she wouldn't be alone. Mario would volunteer to babysit her in a heartbeat. But there was more to dating than hooking up. But the feeling never faded. However, with Hizashi it felt different. It felt like they could potentially be real, and Shouta was looking forward to seeing what happens between them. They took the table on the far end of the small shop, and Hizashi started asking questions to Hitoshi. It was obviously a ploy to get him to open up more than he had at the zoo. Shouta sat back and listened as Hitoshi started talking about the class, and how difficult the test was. The group of teens on the other side were getting awfully loud and rowdy. Hitoshi kept giving them side glances, almost as if he was worried they were going to see him, or worried they wouldn't. Shouta wasn't sure. It was a couple minutes into the conversation when one of the teens, a green-haired boy, looked over at the table, and Shouta could see out of the corner of his eye him walking up to the table. "Shinso?" he asked, and Hitoshi looked over. Hello, Midoriya." The green-haired boy, Midoriya presumably, smiled at being recognized. "I thought it was you. What are you doing here?" "We're celebrating!" Eri practically shouted, ice cream smeared across her face. "Celebrating?" For a moment, Midoriya looked confused before understanding dawned at him. "Does that mean you got in?" Hitoshi nodded, and Midoriya launched himself at him in a hug. For a moment, Hitoshi looked at Shouta with a wide-eye expression, as if pleading for help. "Sorry." Midoriya let go before turning to Shouta. "Namizuka Midoriya. I was helping Shinso study for the test." "Aizawa." He reached out for a shake, and was surprised that Midoriya accepted. "Shinso, if you wanted to join us, you're welcome to. After all, you're going to be in our class." He gestured at the group of boys, which consisted of a redhead and Crocs, who looked like he was trying to set a world record for the amount of ice creams a human could eat in one sitting. One with half red and half white hair, sipping water. One blonde that was glaring daggers at everyone. And one blonde that was too busy trying to create one of those physics puzzles where you have to balance the spoons and cups exactly right before it toppled over. "I don't want to intrude." Even though Hitoshi looked like he very much wanted to join them. "You wouldn't be." Midoriya turned to shout at the group. "Guys, is it okay if Shinso joins us?" "Seriously?" The angry blonde snapped. "I only invited Shitty here. It's half bad that you and Split Die had to join. And I don't even know why you're here." He pointed at the other blonde, who was engrossed in his concentration. "I don't know, it sounded fun," he answered. Unfortunately, he didn't add on the last spoon at just the right angle, and the whole thing toppled over. He shrugged and walked over to join Midoriya, leaving the table a mess. "You should totally come join us. Ignore Bakugo, he just likes to be a jerk. Hi, I'm Dinky Kaminari, by the way." He waved at Hitoshi. "Hitoshi Shinso." "Whoa! Is this your dad? You guys look so much alike." Kaminari looked between Shouta and Hitoshi a few times. "Actually." Shouta started to correct him, not wanting to presume to replace his biological father. "Can I join them?" Hitoshi cut him off. For a moment, Shouta didn't know how to respond. He knew exactly what he was doing by allowing them to think that Shouta was his dad. He nearly wanted to cry at the admission, but he knew he couldn't. "Of course." Shouta just gave a small smile, which was returned by Hitoshi. He slipped out the table. They took a few steps towards the other table before Shouta heard Kaminari say in a whisper that was much too loud, "Dude, your dad is hot." Thanks." Hitoshi scrunched his nose in disgust. The same look must have been appearing on Shota's face because Hizashi burst out laughing. I think I agree with him." Hizashi teased, before taking a spoonful of ice cream. He just responded with a flat stare before rolling his eyes. "Wait, do you have a fever, Daddy?" Eri asked, voice full of concern. He just sighed. "No, don't worry about it." It was nice being able to spend time with Hizashi, and Shouta was happy to see how well he seemed to be getting along with those who would be in his class starting on Monday. Every time he glanced over at their table, which he tried not to do very often since he knew Hitoshi deserved some privacy, he could see how much the group seemed to be accepting of him. There was a small smile on his face that Shouta didn't get to see too often. "So, how was work this week?" Hisashi asked, which pulled Shota's attention away from the group. "It was a bit of a headache. They got this new arrogant prick on the force that keeps getting in my way of trying to get information for an article." "That sounds frustrating. Is it normally like that? I don't know too much about journalism." "When I was first hired, it could be." Shouta remembered back when he first got hired at the Public Safety Commission, when he was fresh out of college. It took a while for the police to start helping him when he tried to get information. They were always worried that their words could get misquoted or twisted in some way when printed out. But after a few years of seeing the work that Shouta did, they started to let their guards down and give more information than they probably should have. But this new guy didn't know who he was yet. Some fresh face out of the academy who only saw him as a reporter who was far too friendly with the rest of the force. But over the years, they've gotten to know me and my work, and now they help whenever they can. It sounds like he might just not know you yet. Maybe have a talk with him. I'm sure he'll see what a great person you are, Hisashi suggested. It couldn't hurt to try. It felt nice to have a conversation with another adult. Shouta had been on his own for the longest time. Emmy was his friend, but they hardly spent time outside of work. A few times a year, they would get drinks or coffee, but never often. Once Eri came along, even those small bits of interactions nearly ceased. For some reason, he never thought to invite Emmy when he and Eri had planned something. But with Hisashi, it felt different. It was almost as if he was going out of his way to look for excuses to spend time with him. Not to mention, Eri absolutely adored him, which made Shouta feel more comfortable with pursuing something between them. He wouldn't dream of dating anyone that Eri didn't approve of. The conversation switched topics, and Eri shared what they worked on during school, with Hisashi providing input every once in a while. Eventually, Eri asked about playing some board games when they got home. She got a new game about unicorns a couple weeks ago when Shouta saw it on sale at the store and had been dying to play it. Shouta agreed, hoping it wouldn't be too late, but he was a bit tired and actually wanted to try and get a full night's sleep. They invited Hisashi, but he declined, which was understandable. It was one thing to meet up for ice cream and to spend time together, and another entirely to go to their home and play a game. Eventually, the group of boys that Hitoshi was with had to leave, but not before Kaminari programmed his number into Hitoshi's phone and told him to text him later. Shouta didn't think anything of it, but Hisashi had a knowing smirk during that interaction. Perhaps he was seeing something that Shouta wasn't. They left not too long after Hitoshi's friends. Hisashi was nice enough to offer to walk them back to the building before he could get a ride back to his place. Even though Shouta insisted he didn't have to, he was glad to have the opportunity to spend a little more time together. Eri was curled up into Shota's side as he carried her home. Apparently, she was too tired to walk back and insisted she needed to be carried. The night was cold, and Shota's brain thought it would be perfectly reasonable to reach out and curl his hand in Hisashi's for extra warmth, but in reality it wasn't, and it was just wishful thinking. Instead, he shoved his free hand into his pocket and walked next to Hisashi, bumping shoulders every so often as they made their way back to the apartment. What Shouta wasn't prepared for was a person sitting on the steps of this building, looking out of place in a thin t-shirt and jeans. His short purple hair was slicked back, but still pointed, almost like a porcupine, and he was scowling a hole into the sidewalk. Hisashi, please take Eri. Without thinking further, he passed Eri over to Hisashi, who tried his best not to wake her too much, but it was no use. The serious tone of the voice must have been enough to alert her that something was wrong. Dad? Hitoshi asked the man on the steps. What are you doing here? Nakio, Shinso, looked up from wherever he was staring at before, and turned that scowl on Hitoshi. What do you mean? I'm here to take you home. He didn't acknowledge anyone else. Instead, he stood from the steps and swayed slightly when he got to his feet. Nakio, you spoke to Sajiro about this? Hitoshi's staying with me for a while. We can talk on the phone when he is ready to return. Shouta took a few steps to place himself in between Hitoshi and his father. Hopefully, he could keep the situation calm, so there won't be an incident. Bullshit! Nakio finally turned to look at Shouta. It was clear from the clouded look in his eyes and rosy cheeks. He had been drinking a fair amount. He's my son, and he needs to be at home. I understand your frustrations, but I think you should leave and go to bed. We can talk about it in the morning when you're sober. He puffed up like a bulldog ready to fight, before taking a few steps closer to Shouta. Although he had a few inches over Shouta and could use that height to intimidate him, it didn't work. Shouta stood firm, crossing his arms over his chest and locking eyes. When Shouta didn't move, Nakia looked confused for a moment. This must have been a tactic to scare others into doing what he wanted, but obviously he wasn't expecting Shouta to stand up to him. He's my son, and I get to say when he has to come home. He bared his teeth. It doesn't work like that. Go home, and I won't have to call your provisional officer. Dad, please, just go home. Hitoshi appeared next to the two men. Shouta knew that the proximity in the situation probably wasn't the best, but before he could say anything, Nakio reached out surprisingly fast for someone who was probably 3 sheets to wind in at this point. Shouta wasn't sure if his intention was to strike Hitoshi or grab him, but he reacted by deflecting the movement, and in one swift motion, he managed to pin Nakio's arm behind his back. He struggled trying to escape from his position, but unfortunately, he didn't seem to be too coherent enough. Hizashi was right there in a second. He used his arm like a shield to put distance between Hitoshi and Naki. Hizashi, please bring the kids inside and call the authorities. Hitoshi, I need you to call Sakio. Shouta tried to keep his voice calm. He didn't want to startle them, especially not Eri, who he has been trying to keep away from violent situations. Luckily, the urgent tone was enough for them to act. Hizashi still holding on to Eri, leading both kids inside the building and out of view. If I let you go, can we have a civilized conversation? Shouta was hoping that without Hitoshi around, his anger would be quieted. He struggled slightly to wrench his arm free, but wasn't able to do anything against Shota's grip. Eventually, he gave up, the shaking of his head the only indication that he heard the question. Shouta released the hold, and Nakio took a few steps, stumbling forward. He spun on his heel to face Shouta, glaring in anger. Don't touch me! His breath was harsh. If you hadn't tried to grab Hitoshi, I wouldn't have. Shouta could feel his own anger start to boil. It took a lot to get Shouta upset, but when he finally did, he could be unforgiving. You have no right to tell me how to raise my son! Nakio baled his fist, but didn't move from his spot. He was probably debating whether or not to get into a fight. Shouta just needed to stall him long enough for the police to arrive. Or Sergio, whoever was first. I'm not telling you how to raise him, but taking your frustrations out on a child is irreprehensible. Shouta tried to keep his voice even, but there was a hint of his own frustration that kept through. When you calm down, we can talk about when Hitoshi can go back home. No! Nakio took a few unsteady steps forward, easily within striking distance, but Shouta remained firm. He wasn't going to be intimidated by some Neanderthal who couldn't even comprehend what a thought is, let alone have one. He's my son, and I don't want him around someone like you anymore. What do you mean, someone like me? Shouta narrowed his eyes, waiting for the shoe to drop. You know exactly what I mean. A police car pulled up on the street as Akio was talking. I don't want you or your boyfriend corrupting my son. Shouta could see Enji Todoroki step out of the police car. At least it was someone who knew that could back him up. Although he wasn't the closest to Enji, he at least took his duties as a police officer seriously. The second person out of the car was Keigo Takayami, the new guy on the force that Shouta was having issues with. If he keeps staying here, Nakio didn't notice the new arrivals, since his back was to them. Then you're gonna turn him into a... He never got the chance to finish that sentence before Shota's fist collided with his jaw. Nakio fell back hard into the sidewalk, clenching his face in his shock. The two police officers sprang into action, Enji rushing forward to block Nakio from retaliating. Keigo, on the other hand, put himself in front of Shouta, pushing against his chest to force him to take a few steps back. Aizawa! Ijiro glared over his shoulders. What the hell is going on? Oh my god. Oh my god, that was homophobia. Does that thing still exist? I'm joking. I know homophobia still exists. Trust me. I am very much aware. As a homo myself, that is something that I'm very much aware of, that homophobia is a real thing. Unfortunately. It's not just a thing of fiction, as much as we all would love for it to just be a fiction thing. Unfortunately, is a real thing. And Jesus fucking Christ, Shouta, you punch him! Punch him! I would have punched him too. Actually, honestly, if I was there and the police didn't arrive on time, well, they wouldn't have arrived to a person. In fact, days later, they would be wondering where Nakio went. I'd be like, where's Nakio? No one's seen Nakio. Oh no, where's Nakio? I don't know. He left my place super angry, super mad, right? Where Nakio is actually, 6 feet under. Yep, 6 feet under. Just 6 feet under. We love that. See, but I'm not Shouta, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. No, but in all reality, I can't even imagine how hard it would be to Hitoshi. Look, having a parent who's an alcoholic is so fucking hard, right? Especially if it's not something super big or super small. Like, it can be hard if there is, like, it's just emotional damage. I mean, it could be hard if it's physical damage as well. It's just hard when a family member or loved one are addicted to something like alcohol, nicotine, stuff like that. But alcohol specifically because alcohol can also alter the way that you behave. Same like with when you're high off of like drugs or something, right? I don't think nicotine affects you that way. I think nicotine is just a taste thing. I don't think nicotine like drugs you up. I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that. But it's hard to be a child with a parent who is abusive of a substance, because in that instance, you grow up being the parent. You grow up saying, hey, you're gonna drive in like an hour. I think maybe that's enough drinks. You already have 3. Let's put down that one. Let's get you some water and some food so that you can fight off this alcoholism, so that you are responsible enough to drive us back home. Right? To drive us back home. You have a long drive ahead of you. 3 hours of a drive. We need you at your tip-top shape. The amount of accidents that happen. Or to have to clean up the bottles. Have to see that your parental parent is, sleeping on the couch and you have to get up, collect all the damn fucking bottles and throw them out. And then you have to, clean up the table and just make sure that there's no more bottles laying around at weird random places like next to the couch or in the fucking bathroom. What the fuck was it in the bathroom? Stuff like that where it can be difficult, right? Especially for a child, right? Someone who is, even as a teen, it is hard. Because you grow up being the responsible one. You grow up being the one who understands. You grow up hating alcohol. You grew up hating alcohol. You grow up hating yourself. Because sometimes kids who are, who have parents who are alcoholics feel as though they're responsible in a way, shape, or form because they didn't stop them, right? Or it can even just be the simple fact that, yes, for example, for Hitoshi, yes, his dad is an alcoholic, but that does not mean that Hitoshi does not love his dad any less. And it is painful to see someone struggling constantly with an abusive substance and not, be aware to be like, hey, I have a problem, let me fix it. Because it's one thing if they understand that they have a problem and they're working to fix it, and it's another thing if they just do it and do it and do it and nothing is stopping them, and you can't get it to their thick skull that they're an alcoholic because they keep saying, I can stop whenever I want, but they never stop. They never do because they never want to stop. And that is alcoholism. And it is hard for a child growing up in that said environment because they grow up being the responsible ones. And I don't mean like, oh, this, alcoholism brings children to be responsible. No, I mean, as in responsible, I mean chronically responsible. This kid feels responsible for things around him. This kid, when he sees that one of his friends or one of their friends is like in trouble, they immediately spring to action. fuck whatever's happening in their life, fuck whatever. They become people pleasers, basically. They become people pleasers, and they believe that they're responsible for everyone around them and to parent everyone around them. They don't get to be a child. They don't get to be a child. And that has long-lasting repercussions with their life. And it is harsh to see this. And I know if I came back from a really nice celebration to see that my dad is literally at the footstep of my foster home, drunk, demanding I go back, I would have been heartbroken. In fact, I love that Hizashi, Eri, and Itoshi happened to be upstairs by the time that man said that homophobic thing, because I don't know what's worse. Oh, actually, no, I know what's worse. Well, I don't know what's worse. Loving your parents, but finding out that they do not respect you and are homophobic, and they don't understand the fact that you love the same gender, or having to understand that no matter what you do, your parent will not stop drinking. I find that those are both hard in their own individual ways, and then smashed together is a horrible combination, if you ask me. Like, wow, okay, you just had to throw both of them in there. Like, where? What? Why are you doing this to Hitoshi? What did Hitoshi do to you, author? Wicked writer, what did Hitoshi do to you? Okay. Point taken is, this was an emotional episode, so, I mean, it wasn't as emotional as some episodes of Screech, but I want to know, what is your guys' favorite, I'm thinking. Give me a second. Let me think. I'm thinking of what to do, because everybody did favorite abstract color, favorite flower. Let's see. I would say favorite song, but that's basic. That's super basic. No, we don't want basic. We want extravagant. I want you sitting there and thinking, what is the answer to that? You know? I need you sitting there and thinking. Ooh, what is your favorite fanfiction? Favorite fanfiction, like of all time. It does not have to be My Hero Academia. Favorite fanfiction of all time, and maybe state why. And I don't know, maybe I'll take a read, even if I'm not in the fandom. I'm gonna be honest. I've read some fanfictions of fandoms that I'm not in, just because I heard their fanfictions were good. But yeah. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.